BBC News at 6 o'clock. This is Luke Tottenham. Good evening. Senior ministers have insisted they have enough support to take the UK out of the European Union at the end of the month, despite the last-minute attempts to delay the process. EU leaders won't consider Boris Johnson's formal request for another Brexit extension until MPs have debated the plans later this week. 2 teenagers have been stabbed to death in Milton Keynes, the latest victims of the record increase in knife crime. In the day's sport, a dramatic late try earned Wales a place in the semi-finals of the Rugby World Cup, and Manchester United are in the lead against Liverpool in the Premier League. The government has shrugged off its Brexit defeat in the Commons yesterday, insisting that it has enough support to get its deal approved by MPs. It's preparing to bring the agreement before Parliament again this week. But Labour has warned it will table amendments seeking to modify the deal or make it subject to a further referendum. Our political correspondent, Jonathan Blake, reports.
Despite Boris Johnson's request for an extension to the Brexit process, albeit heavily caveated with an accompanying letter saying that he doesn't actually want one, ministers insist the UK can and will leave the EU by the current deadline. The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab said EU member states were fed up and didn't want any further delay. He told the Andrew Marr Show on BBC One that the Prime Minister's deal had momentum and the government would put forward legislation this week.
The game changer this week is that he's defied the doubters, got a deal, and we also now, notwithstanding the shenanigans in Parliament, appear to have now the numbers to get this through. The only question is, why aren't we getting on with it?
Several leading critics of Boris Johnson have now said they'll support his deal in the Commons. The latest was the former Conservative MP and Cabinet Minister Amber Rudd, who now sits as an independent. She told Sky's Sophie Ridge on Sunday she would offer her support.
I thought that Theresa May's deal was the right deal. I think this is not as good, but I will nevertheless support it. My biggest concern about it is about the union and, the major parties from Scotland and from Northern Ireland both heavily oppose it. But nevertheless, I think that we should go ahead with it.
Labour and other opposition parties remain opposed to Boris Johnson's deal. The shadow Brexit Secretary Sir Keir Starmer said his party would try to amend the legislation going through Parliament to seek a closer economic relationship with the EU, further guarantees against leaving without a deal and secure another public vote.
If he brings in a bill to implement his deal, we will fight amendments on that because his deal is a very, very bad deal. We need an amendment to say that whatever deal gets through, it should be subject to a referendum where that deal is put to the public and they're asked, do you want to leave on these terms or would you rather remain in the EU?
With the current Brexit deadline now just 11 days away, another dramatic week at Westminster is guaranteed.
Officials in Brussels are pressing ahead with plans to ratify the Brexit deal despite the upheaval at Westminster. EU leaders haven't publicly commented on Boris Johnson's decision to send a second letter warning them of the dangers of granting a Brexit extension. Here's our Europe reporter, Adam Fleming.
The European Council President Donald Tusk is consulting EU leaders about the Prime Minister's reluctant request for an extension to the Brexit process. Despite Mr Johnson making clear his opposition to a further delay, the EU is taking the request at face value. However, Brussels won't seriously consider acting on it until the situation at Westminster becomes clearer, they hope, in a few days. A delay may also require a special leaders' summit closer to the 31st of October deadline. The subject wasn't discussed at this morning's meeting of ambassadors from the member states. They focused on the legal process for ratifying the deal on the European side. They were told by the chief negotiator Michel Barnier that yesterday's vote in Parliament amounted to a delay rather than a rejection. In Brussels, frustration with the situation has never been greater, but neither has the desire to get the deal through.
The government will seek to hold another meaningful vote on its Brexit deal in the Commons tomorrow. That would require the consent of the Speaker, John Bercow, and the indications tonight are that he'll refuse it. Our deputy political editor, John Pienaar, reflects on what another parliamentary setback would mean for the Prime Minister and his Brexit strategy.
For Boris Johnson's team, the claim again and again that they'll deliver Brexit on time with no extension, no delay is about faith. Where Brexit's concerned, ministers like Dominic Raab and Michael Gove are the faithful. But more than that, it's about sending a message to Brexit-supporting voters ahead of the coming election that the PM and his team are the true, undisputed heavyweight political champions of Brexit, not Nigel Farage and his Brexit party. This week they'll need all the faith and fighting spirit they can muster. From all I can gather, the smart money in politics is on the Speaker, John Bercow, refusing to allow a rerun of yesterday's vote tomorrow. He's certainly been clear in the past that he and Parliamentary Convention are against rerunning a vote simply because the loser didn't like the outcome. Another vote, this one on the legislation that's needed to approve the Brexit plan, may have more chance of passing, especially now a delay is more than possible and a no-deal exit has receded. Expect long, hard wrangles about Brexit and about another referendum. Getting Brexit over the line on time still looks like a gruelling task, maybe as gruelling for many as witnessing this political saga over the last 1,213 days since the referendum.
Two 17-year-old boys have been stabbed to death at a house party in Milton Keynes in Buckinghamshire. The victims have been named locally as Dom Ansar and Ben Gillam Rice. Police and paramedics were called to the Emerson Valley area just before midnight. Our reporter Katie Austin is there.
A police cordon remains in place around Archford Croft, a quiet residential street, as officers investigate how two teenagers lost their lives at a party. What appears to be blood is smeared on the front door of the property. Thames Valley Police say one 17-year-old boy died at the scene and another died later in hospital. Two other people, a 17-year-old and a 23-year-old man, were also injured. Officers believe the victims had been invited to the party. Detective Chief Superintendent Ian Hunter spoke to reporters.
I fully appreciate the concern that this will cause in the local community and beyond, but at this early stage, I believe the people directly involved in this incident are all likely to have known each other.
Neighbours have expressed their disbelief at the loss of life.
This never happened in the area. We've lived in the area for 6 years. Next year will be 7 years. And I have not seen such a scene until today. And it was just a shock and a blow.
Till you find out more about it, you just keep your doors shut. It's scary.
The families of the teenagers who died are being supported by specialist officers. Figures released on Thursday show that knife crime offences in England and Wales reached an all-time high in the 12 months to the end of June, although the number of related homicides fell. Now, two more families are dealing with the devastating consequences.
5 men and a 16-year-old boy have been arrested on suspicion of murder